The format for tonight's meeting will be held essentially in three parts. Part one will be introductions and presentations. I'll introduce the folks that are sitting up here next to me. They'll tell you who they are, what their role is in the process. And then part two of the meeting will be an informal discussion period. Really, it's a question and answer session. It'll be your opportunity to ask questions about the application that's pending before TCEQ. And then either TCEQ staff or the applicant representatives will attempt to provide a response. The most important thing to remember about the informal discussion period is that none of the statements you make during that part of the meeting are considered comments on the application. That won't be considered by staff or the commissioners. So that informal discussion period is really an opportunity for you to learn more about this air permit application that's pending before TCEQ. The third part of the meeting is the formal comment session. So we'll take a break after the Q&A. We'll come back, we'll start that formal comment session. During the formal comment session, I will call on you in the order in which you registered and indicated that you wanted to provide comments during tonight's meeting. I'll call you up in the order in which you registered. You'll come up to the microphone, state your name for the record, provide your comments. During that formal comment session, no one up front is responding at that point. The comments you provide during the last part of the meeting get combined with all the written comments that have been submitted on this application, and they get responded to in one written document called the Executive Director's Response to Public Comments. And so as I mentioned before the meeting, if you know that you want to provide comments during tonight's meeting, or if you'd like to be on the mailing list to receive future notices and to receive that written response to public comments, please visit the registration table that's in the back of the room and fill out one of our registration forms. Everyone who comes up during the formal comment session and wants to provide formal comments will need to fill out one of the forms for us. All right, so that's the agenda for tonight's meeting. I did want to mention that tonight's meeting was requested by Senator Lois Kolkhorst and Representative Stan Gertis. I don't believe that we have anyone from their offices with us tonight, but if you're here, we do appreciate you being here with us. Also, there might be some other local elected officials that are here with us tonight. We appreciate you being here with us as well. So to get us started with part one, the introductions and presentations, to my left, I'm going to introduce the folks that are here tonight representing the applicant, SL Energy Power Plant 1 LLC. We have Arlen Hammett, Clinton Garza, and Chad Nairn. And they're here tonight to respond to questions about the air permit application on behalf of the applicant. On behalf of the TCEQ, from the Office of the Chief Clerk, myself, Brad Patterson, I'll be the moderator for tonight's public meeting. In the back of the room, helping you get registered, was Lori Rowe. And then to my far right is Jesus Barcena. Jesus is operating our sound and recording equipment. And so I'm going to take just a moment to talk about that. So in addition to amplifying sound tonight, we are making a recording of the entire meeting in order to hear you tonight and also in order to pick you up on the recording. Anyone who speaks tonight will need to speak into a microphone. And so we have microphones up here for the panelists to use, and then we've got a microphone set up in front of me for the public to use. So again, during the informal discussion period, that Q&A session, I'm going to ask you to come up to the microphone to ask your questions. And then during the formal comment session, when you come up to provide your comments, again, you'll need to come up to the microphone and use the microphone. Good evening. We're conducting registration in the back of the room for tonight's meeting. All right, so Jesus is operating our sound and recording equipment. From the Air Permits Division, we have Wee Pham and Joel Stanford. And then from the Environmental Law Division, Kate Keithley and Elizabeth Black. Kate and Elizabeth are here tonight representing the Executive Director of the agency. And then finally from our Austin Regional Office, Elijah Gandy is here. Our regional office is where our environmental investigators work out of. And so if you ever had any concerns or questions about any facility that TCEQ regulates in this area, not just this facility, but any facility that TCEQ regulates in this area, you would be contacting the Austin Regional Office. They would conduct investigations as appropriate, fill out reports as appropriate, and follow up with you. So that's the folks that we have here tonight from TCEQ. TCEQ staff do have a couple of presentations. They are brief. And to get started with that, I'll recognize Wee.
Thank you, Brad. And to my right here is Joel Stanford, team lead permit reviewer. But my name is Hui Pham. I'm the TCEQ permit reviewer assigned to complete the technical review for this project. SL Energy has requested authorization of a power plant in Lexington consisting of two natural gas-fired combined cycle turbines with a maximum power generation of 1,240 megawatts. My role with the permit application is to ensure that the applicant has represented that their operations will be protective of human health, welfare, and the environment in accordance with state and federal law. So this application includes a prevention of significant deterioration review, or PSD review as I'll call from now on, which applies for the following pollutants: volatile organic compounds, sulfur dioxide, sulfuric acid, and greenhouse gas emissions. So this includes reviewing and verifying the applicant's control technology to ensure that they are using the PSD best available control technology for those pollutants. Control technologies for all other pollutants emitted meet the state's best available control technology requirement. There is also a review of the applicant's modeling conducted and the applicant's maximum emissions data and calculations. And finally, developing a permit for which the applicant is required to operate under, according to the representations they've made to us. And so we determined from that technical review that the proposed air permit application is expected to be protective of the environment and human health, including those most vulnerable, such as elderly, children, and those with pre-existing health concerns. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have on the application, and thank you for your participation this evening.
All right, and so we's going to pass the microphone to Elizabeth, who will talk about the administrative process for this type of application.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Black, and I'm an attorney in TCEQ's Environmental Law Division, and I'm joined by my colleague, Catherine Keithley. I want to thank you all for coming to this public meeting tonight, and I'm briefly going to summarize where we are in the administrative process. Tonight's application is for permit number 177380, issuance of Prevention of Significant Deterioration, or PSD permit, PSDTX 1650, and issuance of Greenhouse Gas, or GHG PSD permit, GHG PSD TX 244. The last day of public comment for this permit application is today, April 24th, 2025. If you submitted a comment prior to this meeting, it is already a part of the formal record. You may choose to make additional comments for the record tonight during the formal comment portion, submit a written comment at any time during the meeting, or submit a comment online. After the public comment period ends, the executive director will prepare a document called the Response to Comments, or RTC, that will respond in writing to the comments received during the comment period. When we complete the RTC, it will be mailed to all persons who submitted comments or are on the mailing list for this permit application. The RTC will include a cover letter that explains how to request a contested case hearing and the deadline for filing such a request. Requests for contested case hearings go before the TCEQ commissioners during a regularly scheduled meeting where the commissioners decide whether to grant these requests. Those who file a request will receive notification when this meeting is scheduled and how to file a formal written response for consideration by the commissioners. For a contested case hearing to be granted, it must be requested by an affected person. To be an affected person, you must demonstrate that you have an interest in the matter not common to the general public. You must also include a physical address in your request so that your proximity to the facility can be determined. Please make sure you include a physical address with your request, even if you would normally receive mail at a P.O. box. I'm available to answer questions relating to the administrative process of obtaining this permit. We also have staff available to answer technical questions about the permit application and the permitting process. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So that does it for part one, the introductions and presentations. So that brings us to part two of tonight's meeting, which is that informal discussion period. And so some things to keep in mind and some ground rules for this part of the meeting. First of all, no final decision has been made on this application. No decisions are going to be made about this application here tonight. The purpose of this meeting is to provide information about the application and to obtain public input on this application. So again, no decisions about this application are going to be made here at tonight's meeting. Also, tonight's meeting is just that. It's a meeting. It's not a hearing. I'm not a judge. I cannot compel someone to give a different answer or a better answer than the answer that they provide to any question. And so we understand that you may ask a question and hear a response that you don't like, that you don't agree with. That's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. What I would encourage you to do is to come back during the formal comment session and tell us why you disagree with what you heard and be as specific as possible. Our time for questions is not unlimited. At some point, we'll cut off the Q&A, take that break, and come back for the formal comment session. So what I mean by that is don't wait. If you know you have a question you'd like to ask, now is the time. Coming up to the microphone, you can form a line if you'd like, and be ready to ask your questions. If you have more than one question, that's fine, but please do go one question at a time. Allow for a full response. Please don't cut anyone off or speak over anyone who's talking. Allow for a full response. And then if you have another question or a follow-up question you'd like to ask, you can go ahead and do that. I think that's it for ground rules at this time. If there's anyone that has any questions regarding the air permit application, I will say that. Tonight's meeting is to discuss the air permit application that's pending before TCEQ. And so we understand that you may have concerns regarding various aspects of this project. But tonight's meeting is to discuss the air permit application that's pending before TCEQ. And so we'll only be addressing questions related to air permitting at TCEQ or that air permit application. So again, now's the time. Come on up. Like I said, you can form a line if you'd like. Tell us your name. If you want to give us that context, that's fine. Ask your question, and we'll provide a response. Come on up.
Just to address the contested request for a contested case hearing, can you be more specific about what would be circumstances that we could request it? Because you just kind of said in general it has to be more than the public.
If you don't mind, speak directly into that microphone so we can all hear you.
Okay, well, oh, that is a lot better. Sorry. I just said she said that to request a contested case hearing, it must be beyond what the public, and if she could give more specific examples, so
Okay.
I can know if I can do that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and elaborate if you can.
So it's a matter that is not applicable to the general public and it's specific to you. I can't give specific examples because it is individualized. But if you do want to read the rule, it is in 30 TAC section 55.
So I'll add a little bit. I don't work in the same office as Elizabeth does, but as I'm sitting in my office, I do sometimes get phone calls from folks who ask those sorts of questions. And what I tell them is you need to be as specific to your circumstances as possible. And so if you raise cattle and you're concerned about your cattle, or if you grow corn or rice or whatever, that level of specificity is more helpful than just saying I'm concerned about air quality. And so that's what that personal justiciable interest means to me. Other questions? You don't have to raise your hand. Come on up. Sorry, I didn't mention that. You don't have to raise your hand. I'm not going to call on you during this part of the meeting. If you know you have a question, I'd encourage you to come on up to the microphone. We'll get through as many questions as we can.
Hi, I'm Ed Harvey, and I live at 1067 County Road B here in Lexington. As these turbines, as I understand it, are fairly new, and they're produced in Germany, I believe, and they're using a relatively new technology for cooling these turbines via radiators. What I don't know is I flew airplanes, and back in the 70s, we had airplanes, and when they took off, all you could see was black smoke behind them. So what they did is they heated up the cans, made them much more efficient. However, the resultant gases were worse as far as your lungs were concerned. In other words, it's like going down the road and seeing the old diesels with the black coming out. It's probably not as bad for you as, well, they now said the DEF helps out. What I'm wondering is have they given you the results of the gases going out the back of the turbine? And have they done it under heat like we have here in Texas? Because I used to be able to fly out of Phoenix and Albuquerque, etc. We were limited to 105 degrees because the oil viscosity would not work on the engines. So this is the type of thing I'm wondering, did they give you all of this type of stuff on these turbines?
All right. That's something we can address.
So the cooling system, I'm not aware of specifically what you're referencing, but there is a cooling system for the water, the steam that's produced. So that's something that we did look at, and it's a system where it does not produce any emissions from that. There are emissions from the turbine stacks themselves, and so that's the majority of the review that we've looked into. But in terms of the cooling system for the steam that's produced, the applicant has provided information to us, technical information that says that there's no emissions from the cooling system that's used.
But you're saying no emissions from the cooling or the steam. How about the engine itself?
Yeah, so I can talk about the turbine itself. So we've assessed during the technical review, we look at multiple aspects, including the control technologies that they've used. So we do what's called the best available control technology. So we see what's technically feasible for a combustion turbine like this to use to reduce their emissions. And so what the applicant is going to use for their turbines is a selective catalytic reduction. And that essentially reduces, and there's been studies to show that there's a reduction of up to 90% of nitrogen oxides from gas turbines. So they use that. They also use oxidation catalysts, and that's to ensure that there's more complete combustion, to ensure that you're getting essentially carbon dioxide instead of a more hazardous carbon monoxide, and it's going to produce, there's going to be no emissions with ensuring that there's more complete combustion. And so that's one part of the review is the best available control technology. We also ensure that modeling is performed to determine potential impacts for neighboring sites and different receptors and communities out there as well.
Thanks. Now, what I'm wondering is if they find out the government has these certain things that you're required to check for, and the companies produce for those to reduce them with these catalysts and all that. If there comes up in the future, we find out that there are more adverse effects, will they still be grandfathered in on these permits, or were they able to say, make a remedy for a pollutant that we don't understand at the moment?
Thank you.
So the first part I'll mention is that they're required to comply with the federal national ambient air quality standards. And so we ensure that with our review that they meet those federal standards as well as state standards as well. The company is also required to comply with the permit that we give them according to state rules in the 30 Texas Administrative Code. And in terms of like after the plant is built and in operation, then there's an avenue for the public if they notice any specific concerns after the plant is in operation. You can contact the regional office to file a complaint specifically if you have a specific concern.
Okay, as a scientist, do you know of other things that aren't covered by the federal regulations today?
So the federal regulations cover 6 criteria plumes, but then we also have for all the other plumes that are emitted from the site, we have state standards for those as well.
Okay,
Right. Thank you.
go ahead.
I was going to say, we've got some folks standing in line, so if you don't mind, we can take questions from someone else. Come on up, sir. You can adjust the height of that microphone if you need to.
I'd rather do that than adjust my height. Okay,
you.
I am Hugh Brown, and I live at 3026 County Road 316, which is quite close to your proposed site. I have lived there for 50 years where I run a wildlife refuge. So I'm keeping up with the wildlife there. And now you say that you're going to be taking care of environment and also human health. Now this plant is going to be putting out various chemicals out its stack as it burns an enormous amount of gas. Now, it also will be quite noisy because I understand it will be air cooled. Air cooled is noisy. Think about your little one cylinder gasoline powered leaf blower, the noise it puts out compared to the 8-cylinder water cooled engine in your car, which is a whole lot quieter, a whole lot bigger engine, but quieter. Now, what I'd like to know is if it's going to be everything all according to within what's acceptable, yet you've wanted to put this plant at the very far end of your long time neck of your property. If it's, and so that all of us and a lot of people live around that end are going to have to deal with the negative consequences of your project. If it's as benign as I've been led to believe you to say, yet you don't want to put it up into the middle of your property where you could deal with the negative consequences. So it looks to me like you are wanting to make money by, in the process of which you want to strew grief in your path and make us bear the environmental cost of your profit. Now,
So
what
again,
do you have to say to that?
this part of the meeting is questions that folks have about the application. You're making a series of statements that sound more like comments to me that you would want to make during
All
the
right.
comments session.
All
So
right. All right.
what questions about the application do you have?
All right. Questions about the application will be, will there be a limit on the amount of noise it can make, the limit amount of light it can put out, and also will there be a lot of monitoring of the air quality around it?
Okay, let's start there. First, questions about light and noise pollution.
So our jurisdiction is established by the legislature, and under the Clean Air Act, we do not have jurisdiction over noise and light pollution. However, during operation, they cannot create nuisance conditions. But I can let air permits talk more about the air quality and things like that.
Okay, now what you say nuisance conditions? What powers do you have over nuisance conditions?
So we'll talk about that. I just wanted to emphasize that for TCEQ, through our permitting process, we cannot control noise or light.
Okay.
Go ahead and talk about, I think you had air nuisance conditions and then also a question about monitoring.
Yeah, so you had a question on monitoring around the area. So first, I'd like to talk about the monitoring that we put into the permit, so that there's a robust permit in terms of monitoring. For the turbines themselves, they're required to do a continuous emissions monitoring system for their nitrogen oxides, their carbon monoxide, and their ammonia emissions. And so it's a continuous monitor, so they have to have all this continuous data that's available, and they have to record it and provide that to the TCEQ. And so they can't get out of that specific monitoring. They're also required to do what's called stack testing, and that's essentially performance testing on their turbines for a number of different chemicals. And so they're required to report all of that testing to us and the results, so that we ensure that the permit that we give them is exactly how they're going to operate us.
Then I have a question for you. Who does the measuring of the pollutants? Do you do it or does Sandow do it?
For the monitoring that I just mentioned, it is performed by the company, by Sandow.
By the company.
Yes. However, we do have air monitors around the state of Texas as well, that are run by TCEQ and by EPA.
Do you have any of those monitors near this site?
At this time, we have some monitors in clean, but in term, which I think the closest monitor is, probably like 20, 30 miles away.
That's
But
not going to be real effective.
And I think, again,
There's-
so during the comment period, if
Okay.
you want to make suggestions about
Okay.
where monitors should be placed, that would be the time to do it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure, thank you. Very good. Next, please. I would have to adjust the microphone down, so I would say feel free to adjust the microphone as needed.
How did,
It's just grab the mic itself and pull it down.
oh, there we go. Hi, my name is Trish Seiler, and I live within a quarter mile of where this is going to be, 1501 County Road 312. I have a list of questions. When you brought up the best available control technology, what are you comparing this to? Because these turbines are brand new. They just finished the 4-year R&D with Duke. So what are you comparing and what are you using for your best available?
Control technology.
Yeah.
Yes. So we look specifically at what the company is proposing to have at their site, and in this case, these are combined cycle gas turbines. And so we have the knowledge because we issue all the permitting in Texas of all the other combined cycle gas turbines that are out there in the state of Texas. And so we have the data from other applications that have come in and permits that we've issued, and the performance testing that other turbines at other sites have been using. And so we use that information, see what kind of control technologies they're using, and state that this is something that is technically feasible, economically reasonable to use as best available control technology. And in terms of like something that's new, like the new turbines that this site is using, then we really ask the applicant for a technical basis. And usually, in this case, it's like a manufacturer's guarantee. And the manufacturer is really the one that has the best available information on the turbine specifically, because they do performance testing on those turbines before they give it to a specific client, such as Sandow Lakes.
So is there any power plant in the state of Texas that has this SGT 69000 HL?
I don't have that information in front of me, but we do have online. We have a turbine list, and it lists all of the turbines currently in Texas that operate at, I believe, 20 or 25 megawatts. So all that information is publicly available
Okay,
on the different turbines.
I can tell you that in the United States, there's only 2 power plants that have one of those turbines.
And if you have information like that, again, the comment period is a great time to bring that forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Next question. Are we gonna, since it's going to be right next door to homes, and there's literally homes with children directly across the street, right next to it, at what point do we look at residential emissions versus commercial emissions? Because there are homes right next to where they want to build it.
All right. Thank you.
I understand your question. So I mentioned the best available control technology first. So that's one part of the review. One of the other major parts of the review is doing modeling or air dispersion modeling. And so what we do in those cases is that we look starting at the fence line of the property. We go out in all directions from the property, starting from 25 meters, and we keep going another 25 meters. And so, there will be properties that fall in, on the fence line to 25 meters. There's some properties that are right next to the facility. But when we look at the modeling, we look at all those different points around the property and determine the potential impacts for all the different pollutants that the proposed site is going to emit. And we determine what those final impacts are and then compare those to the state or the federal standards that I mentioned earlier. And those standards are really there to be designed to be protective of human health and the environment. So we ensure that we look at both residential and commercial, all the different kinds of areas to make sure that we take care of.
When those standards are set to protect human health, does that include the elderly, young people, folks with pre-existing respiratory conditions?
Yes,
Yes.
correct. It's supposed to protects against all people.
Okay, so since there are homes next to the property line, are you going to look at this plant with residential emission limits or commercial limits? Because I know that there's a difference.
So I'm going to ask you, because that's actually a phrase that I've not heard anyone use before. What do you mean residential emissions versus commercial emissions? Just so I understand your question.
I would literally have to go in and look up the statute, but I found it on the TCEQ. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, but
I found
can
it on the
answer your question, though.
TCEQ
Okay.
website.
Let's let
Do you
Joel,
know what I'm talking about?
Let's let Joel have a stab at
Yeah,
it.
I think I know what you're talking about. So there's national ambient air quality standards. The national standards are blind to the nature of the property use. Those are the same standards apply whether it's a agricultural field, a preschool, a house, someone like that. Texas does have the effect screening limits, and maybe this is what you're getting at is on some of the effect screening limits, you can do kind of a screening level where if you're above an effect screening level, and it's on industrial land, then it is treated differently.
Industrial.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
the affected. It's
Right.
if you are an affected
Let's
something with it. Yes.
let Joel continue.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, on an industrial area, you get, there's a potential there in certain circumstances where you could exceed that effect screening level, and you don't have to do a secondary level of review. In this case, all the pollutants were below the effect screening level, so essentially it would not get to that level where you're differentiating between industrial or residential and so forth. In this case, everything is below that effect screening level, so the review basically stops at that point. That you don't have to do that second level where you determine.
Right. And so you've asked a handful of questions. Well, if you have one more question, and then we got folks who are waiting.
Do we know what VOC chemicals, cleaning chemicals they're going to use during maintenance and shutdown for cleaning of the blades and the emissions that are going to come with that?
Okay, thank you.
I may have that information right here.
Perhaps we could circle back around in just a minute while you guys look that up, and maybe take one more question from the person who's waiting.
Okay.
But we'll come back to
I'll get back in line.
maintenance, startup, and shutdown.
Sorry, I did find the answer right.
Okay, go ahead.
I found the answer right when you sat down. Yeah, so the chemical that they've stated is ZOK 27. And so we ensure that with the cleaning chemical that they represent, that we have a limit provided for that specific chemical. We ask the company, how much of this are you expected to use every hour and every year? And we ensure that we develop an emission rate that's based on that specific chemical. And then the company is also required to do monitoring and record keeping for the turbine blade washing as well, including the amount of chemicals that they use.
Do you have
Okay.
information on that chemical?
Hold on.
I have the name of the chemical, ZOK 27.
All right. So the question was, do you have information on that chemical? And that was?
ZOK 27.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Cheryl Dietrich Neff. I'm not as close to the location. I live on County Road 310, and I raise livestock. And so I'm concerned about the air pollution because the pollution that is going to be puts out greenhouse gases. It puts out acid rain. I know it's not in major limits at any given time, but I'd like to know the cumulative effect or residual effect of these things because my animals eat the grass that this is going to land on, as well as me ingesting the air.
All right. Thank you.
So for cumulative effects, we really evaluate that during the modeling step. And so we ensure that the applicant has represented all other sources that are within 50 kilometers of the proposed site, so 30 miles. So the company is required in the modeling and in the demonstration that they provided to us to include all those other potential emitting sources that are within those 30 miles in their modeling. as well as taking any information from specific monitors, air monitors that are out there to get a background concentration. And so they take all that information together along with the emissions from the proposed plant that we're looking at. And we get a final number and we compare those to the state and the federal limits that have been established that are protective of human health and the environment. So we ensure that we do look at all the cumulative effects.
Okay, you keep saying human health. I'm concerned about my animal health as well as the wildlife.
So I guess talk about how the standards are set to also be protective of animals, plants.
Right.
forth.
So EPA has developed primary and secondary standards. The primary ones are human health focused. The secondary standards are focused on the welfare. So that includes soil, vegetation, animals, cattle, buildings, including and that as well. So those secondary standards are along with the primary standards are what we're looking at when we do the modeling to see that it's protective of both those primary and the secondary standards, essentially the ecological standards.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Again, feel free to adjust that mic.
Yeah, well, okay, as you know, I'm Hugh Brown. And I have a question, maybe for the applicant, maybe for you folks, maybe kind of both. Here's the deal. That tract, it's, I believe, 64 acres, something like that. The plans I have seen put that plant in what looks like sort of the southeast quadrant of that tract, not in the middle where you might think, but in the southeast quadrant. And I'm concerned that maybe in the future, Sandow is going to want to come back and put more plants on that tract. Now, how does that affect the permitting process? Will future plants be judged separately or cumulatively in their emissions? And will there be a restriction on how much plant can be put on that tract? There might be room for, say, 4 plants.
All right.
So I'd like to know what the applicant's plans are, tentatively or definitely, and also your reaction to that possibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll start with staff. Just talk about the potential for future growth. What sort of what would that sort of thing require? Public notice, or how would folks find out if they wanted to add a second facility?
So once this permit is issued and they're in operation, they'll have specific monitoring and data for the TCEQ on their actual operations. Now, if Sandow were to come to the TCEQ for another permit application for something else entirely, then we would have to do essentially the rigorous review that we're doing at this time for this proposed plant, but for whatever they're proposing. And at that time, we'll have the information, the real-time information from the Sandow Lakes facility. And so we'll take that information into account, including all the other cumulative effects and other sites that are within the area as well. So we'll be sure to take into account the emissions from this site as well.
And then do you folks have any information about additional facilities beyond this one?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Are you willing to commit to not put more facilities on that tract?
I don't have that kind of authority. We have one application in front of us today, which is what we're here for.
Yeah,
So I'm not committing up or down.
well,
Well, and I also said earlier that no decisions are going to be made about the application or even future projects at tonight's meeting.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening. My name is Roy Morris. I live at 1220 County Road 306. And I would like to thank the rest of you folks from Lee County for showing up tonight. I live less than 2 miles from that plant. I noticed a couple other folks living nearby too. My concern is I heard the statement that some of the air quality and monitoring was 20, 30 miles away. And I was just wondering why, is there something that's right now that's the air quality of the nearby plant? Some numbers that we have right now? And what do we have in the future as a recourse if our health conditions worsen because of this plant?
So when I mentioned the cumulative effects and the companies providing the information on other monitors, the applicant has to make the demonstration to us that the air monitor that they choose for that pollutant is appropriate, at least equal to or more conservative of what would actually be in this actual area. And so some of the monitors that are chosen are in more suburban or light industrial areas relative to this area specifically. And so those are more conservative because of the emissions from those monitors will be higher in general than the emissions that would be here. And so that's to us a reasonable approach to use those specific monitors because the levels at those monitors are likely going to be higher than what's here. But they also look at other things. They have to make the claim to us on land use, the county population, the county emissions, and an actual review of the emissions from the surrounding area of the monitor site relative to this specific site as well.
I do want to be very clear here, if we can, that there's a difference between a monitor that they use for modeling purposes as opposed to a monitor that TCEQ uses to monitor air quality in the area, right? And I feel like you were asking about a monitor that monitors air quality in the area.
In the immediate
Yeah.
area,
And
yes.
so what I would say is, TCEQ has a, Joel, I may ask you to help me if you can, but TCEQ has an air monitoring network across the state, and they look at those monitors and they have to decide where we're going to put those to make the best use of them. And I know that that's something they look at on a yearly basis, every May, I believe, and I think they even open up to public comment. And so I would encourage you to go to our website to find more information about that process and how you can have input on where those specific air quality monitors should be placed.
Okay, yeah, that pretty much answered my question. So, yeah, thank you.
All right, thank
So,
you.
yes, thanks, money over us, so.
All right, thank you, sir. Folks, again, I understand that you might not agree or like answers that we provide tonight. I would ask you to please maintain a professional demeanor, professional language during the course of the meeting. Yes, ma'am.
I won't say anything inappropriate. All right, hi, Dr. Rachel Bailey.
Get real close to that microphone so we can hear you.
That has to be really close. Hi, Dr. Rachel Bailey. Our property is within less than half a mile on a couple different borders from the proposed location. I'm a chiropractor and we also ranch. We've been ranching in that area continuously for over 100 years. We have an award from the state. So being outdoors, one of my questions is, when I'm outdoors a lot, so does that matter when you're looking at the application for the people that are affected in that region? I spend more, because when you're inside, it's a little more filtered than when you're outside. And my family, we spend a lot of time fixing fences, sorting cattle outside for many, many hours. Does that matter? Is that taken into account?
Yes, so the primary standards and the secondary standards I mentioned are EPA developed standards by their scientists, health doctors. And so those secondary standards I mentioned are essentially ecological standards.
But
and so
those are for the animals, right? The primaries for the human?
The primaries for human. Yes,
I'm asking about the human that's outside a lot.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I'm asking about primary, but if the person is outside more hours, so we're within less than half a mile, and we're outside many more hours than probably other residents next door to us. So is that taking into consideration with this permit?
Yes. So the modeling looks at a 50-kilometer radius, so a 30-mile radius outside of the site. So it will include all affected people that are within those 30 miles.
And they do take that into account if we spend more hours
I think
outside?
let's talk a little bit more about it might be like a higher level discussion of how the NACs are developed. Go ahead, Joel.
Sorry.
Okay,
So
thanks.
it's actually in the name. So the word national ambient air, and
Okay.
what ambient air means is outdoor air.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. It's designed specifically so that if you walk outside of your home, you walk around your property. If you walk up to this property line, like where the plant is located, that's ambient air as well.
But a lot of the regulations with foods and air and different things are based on average expected time to be outside.
Right, yeah, and so these standards are built around averaging times. Now, those averaging times have complicated backstories, like, for instance, what's the half-life of a pollutant in the air? Something like ozone, for instance, can decay, et cetera. So there's complicated things that go into that, but there's both short-term and annual standards depending on the pollutant. So those are designed to protect you short-term exposure or long-term exposure if you're living there. It's designed to be protective of you. If you're someone who's just visiting, you go to a park or something like that, it's designed to protect you while you're at the park as well.
Okay. Also, special needs. My daughter, she has autism, dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, sensory processing disorder. She has had trouble. She has multiple SNPs that relate with minerals as well as something else, but she has had like adverse reactions to vaccines. So we've had to work with her, her pediatricians about being careful about exposures and testing titers so we don't expose her more due to seizures. Are those kind of special needs situations taken into account within less than half a mile?
Yes, those standards specifically look at vulnerable populations,
Okay.
people such as children, elderly, and those with pre-existing health conditions, like you mentioned.
What about careers? My husband has been in the industry with building and manufacturing for more than 20 years. And so he is already exposed to certain levels that are regulated through his career. So is that taken into consideration as well when then he's exposed at home or, outside when he's working on the cattle?
Yes, those standards also apply in those cases as well, since it would
And
be.
it's all looked at combined?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I would just say, the national ambient air quality standards are set by the EPA. They do review those standards every 5 years. And so, again, that's something you might consider looking into, because I think when they open them up for review, they take public input as well. But those are standards that are set by EPA.
But as far as this particular application, that won't really be looked at, is what you're saying?
I think it's looked at in terms of making sure they meet those standards.
Okay, but the person's exposure through their career added on extra may not necessarily be taken into consideration.
Yeah, so I think that's where that comes into the pre-existing conditions.
Okay.
In other words, if someone has COPD, some kind of lung disorder, that sort of thing, those particulate matter standards are designed to protect those people. Similarly, like the ozone-based standards, those can also affect people with lung issues. So yeah, it is effectively a standard that is designed by scientists and doctors to protect everyone, no matter your occupational exposure, your pre-existing health conditions, your age, your youth.
Well, just for the record, I am one of those. I've had to go on Advair multiple times, et cetera, but I did put that in the written comments as well.
I was going to suggest that when you comment that you include, this is, like I said, the level of specifics that we're looking for.
I did include some of those.
Okay.
Hold on. Oh, I've heard of the SSM events where they can have an increased exposure for a short period of time due to maintenance or start of a shutdown. If what I understand is correct, how often can those happen?
So that's part of the review, is that we know that these activities happen, and that's just the nature of the combined cycle power plants. And so we put in limits into the permit based on the representations that they've made to us. Okay. And so that's 8 startups and shutdowns. So we make sure that we quantify those emissions correctly and model those activities so that we ensure that it meets those EPA standards as well.
And just real quick, we've been doing Q&A for about 40 minutes. We'll allot about 10 more minutes to Q&A, then we'll take a break and then come back and take formal comments.
One last question. We have 2 businesses that we run from that property. Is this look at also how it affects the businesses being able to operate, or is it primarily about health of the people and the animals and the wildlife?
It's about the air quality, so the people and wildlife. That's the purpose
the
of the
business part?
permit application. Yeah, that's solely the scope of this permit project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
My name is Susan Davis. I live at 3700 County Road 481. Our property backs up and we're on a vista. And my question is on the modeling. We currently sit at about 575 feet at sea level, whereas the base where the plant will be built is at around 430. We are not far from the plant at all. We're within the circle. So we are The plant will be directly southeast from us with prevailing winds constantly from the south coming right across our property. It sits in a valley. The plant will be in a valley behind us, and our property and our home faces out. Our kitchen window will be looking at the plant every day now. Are those prevailing winds taken into consideration for the air permitting process? We will be at eye level with the top of the stack and the wind 12 miles an hour today, pushing it directly into our home and onto our grandchildren.
All right, thank you.
So the modeling that was performed, um, like I mentioned earlier, it starts at the property line and then it goes out 25 meters in all directions. And so we ensure that we're performing modeling and determining the impacts at all of those different little points that are along the grid that we've created in the model to ensure that we see what those values are at every single point and ensures that at all those different points that are outside of the property, that it's still under those standards that are protected.
And you
within
use the
environment.
topography and the elevation to
Yes,
determine
that's
that?
the other part of it too.
For
So
exposure?
it includes the meteorological data um, specifically, and it also includes the differences in elevation that you mentioned as well. So that's all built into the model as well. So we ensure that we do all possible scenarios, including the one specific for this area as well.
Are there limits on the startup and shutdown times when they just will be belching out large amounts of smoke that will be coming directly into my home? Are there limits to that where they have to at some point shut it down? Or will they just be allowed to run startup for days until they get all the functions proper while they're just smoking us out? How is that controlled with the air permit?
So no, they're not allowed to exceed their permit. So when they submit the application to us, they have to show how much of this startup and shutdown that they are going to represent. And then we put into their permit that specific limit based on what they represented to us. And so on top of that, they have the monitoring that's there in record keeping, and including the real-time monitoring that I mentioned previously. And so they're required to submit that information to us, and we can compare that to the permit that we've given them to see if they are complying with their permit essentially.
And because there are no existing units like this, we don't have any real data. Is that correct? We're all going on what the manufacturer is saying it will do?
We have data that's on other combined cycle power plants in Texas.
But not
The
that particular unit.
Not this particular engine. Although, to my knowledge, we may have it available on our turbine list that's online. And so you can go look at that turbine list, and there may be another turbine that's the exact same one as this one, and a permit that may be issued with that information.
Okay. And then one last question. When you mentioned the NIH a couple times, and when you go on their website or you read their information, they've determined discharge from natural gas plants at any range or at ranges increase the risk of hospitalizations from asthma, lung, and heart disease. So I'm not sure at what limit or how do you determine where you're at a limit that's too high and we're too close to it? How do you determine that?
Right. That's why, so with our permit reviews, we take them all on a case-by-case basis. And so that comes back to the monitoring, the modeling that I mentioned, where
And-
we look specifically at this specific site and all the different residences that are around the property, any schools specifically, and we look at the specific potential
Has
impacts.
the modeling been done? That's,
The applicant has to perform the modeling.
the
and we
modeling has
review
not
it.
been done, okay.
The modeling has been done and reviewed.
Oh, and reviewed,
Yes,
okay,
by
okay.
the TCEQ.
All right.
And so our results from that is that
And-
they're
and
below
I-
those standards.
I just have one last question. As far as the air permit goes, is there any specification for public power output versus private use on the air permit? If this is for a private use facility, is there a difference for the air permit qualifications or requirements?
All right, thank you.
So that's outside of the jurisdiction of the TCEQ.
Good
Yes.
evening. My name's Johnny Kane. I live in Blue. I guess my question is going to be for you since you're answering most of them. My question is about the emissions and how's emissions determined? Is it like an average of the data? Is it a max? Is there a period of time that's averaged over that's considered incompliant?
So based on what the applicant represents, we put into their permit an hourly limit, so based on a 1 hour period. And then we also do an annual or a 12-month, a yearly number specifically. And we take the information that's specifically from the manufacturer and what the applicant's expected fuel usage is. We take that information together to develop those specific emission rates, the hourly and the annual emission.
So within an hour, there can be a period of time that they're far in excess of the standard, but over time averaging, it drops down? Is that
So
what you're
the
considering?
so the hourly emission rate that I mentioned is the maximum possible emission rate, and that's including like the maximum fuel flow rates that would be potentially in operation at any time during the year. So we make sure that we represent what could be the worst case or the maximum emission rates to develop that hourly emission rate.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have is about the modeling. You've referred to modeling pretty frequently tonight. How accurate is this model? Has it been verified with existing power plants?
So those standards are developed by the EPA scientists through decades of research, and so those are used across the state and also across other states as well. And so those are really the standards, developed by the Federal Clean Air Act, and those are used, across the whole state. So.
Yeah, being used, but is the accuracy 70%? Is it 95%? 50%? What's the accuracy of these models? You've got existing power plants across the U.S. If this modeling is being used, surely there's data out there.
Right. So that modeling software that I mentioned is also compared to real-time data, and it's also continuously being developed to use real-time data as well. So we ensure that even though this is like a software model, that it's compared to real monitoring that's out there as well. So it is accurate.
When you say accurate, what's the accuracy?
Do we have a quantitative percentage or anything like that we're aware of?
Okay, so yeah. So first off, for these types of complex models, they use something called AirMod, which is a long acronym that I won't bore you with. But basically, the models are developed by EPA ultimately. And I'll get to your accuracy thing in just a second here. They go back, way back, even into like the 1970s. They're kind of a continually evolving process. The models have been designed and developed in conjunction with with the monitoring he was talking about to validate the model. But the model is never 100. You can't just say it's 100% accurate. You can't say it's 95%. What you can say is, whether or not it's a quality model that is predictive and, statistically relevant. Essentially, it's all kinds of math that goes into that. So effectively, these are the best models that humanity has developed, or the US EPA ones. They're kind of the gold standard around the world in terms of accuracy. And again, they bake in everything from from the meteorology in the area to all the elevation, the individual stack parameters to simulate essentially how those things move and disperse across the land. But again, they'll never be 100% accurate. That's not something anybody can claim essentially. But they are the best tools that we have.
When you say best tool, there's surely some data out there to tell me how accurate it is.
Yeah. So if you look really, even on like the Wikipedia page for AirMod, they've actually got
I'm
some.
not going to go to Wikipedia.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry.
EPA has some sites, or at least they used to, for AirMod that talk about its development and how they kind of validate it in the real world, and that it is predictive of how plumes of air behave. It's all based on really engineering work related to how air moves across surfaces.
Yeah, but there's surely, you're the Texas Air Quality Commission, right? You guys.
I think we're kind of at a point here. First of all, AirMod is AERMOD.
Yes.
I think we're at a point here where I think that's something that you can raise in the comments. They can do some more research and provide you a written response. But I think we've given the response that we have for you tonight.
Yeah, I'll definitely want a written response.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this will be the last question that we take tonight. Come on up.
Okay.
Then we'll take a break and come back for the formal comment session.
Is there going to be hazardous gas detection equipment for the ammonia that's used to fire into the turbines?
Yes, so there is monitoring specifically for the ammonia that's being emitted from the stack. And so that's also continuous emissions monitoring. And so they're required to do that monitoring, the record keeping, and have all that information sent to the TCEQ and available for us to review as well. And we ensure that it complies with their permit that we are writing for them.
Okay, what happens if they change their fuel type? Because these turbines not only run on natural gas, but they also run on hydrogen. They also run on fuel oil, number 2 fuel oil.
All right.
So how does that change?
So that specifically is outside of the permit that we've written for them. So it would be them being out of compliance with their permit essentially.
Would they
So
have to come
they're-
in for an amendment if they wanted to change the fuel type or?
Yeah, so
not
that
even
would be a new change that they would have to represent to us as something that's different from what they're proposing right now. So they aren't allowed to emit. I mentioned the 30 Texas Administrative Code. The specific citation for that is 116.110G, which specifies that the company is required to operate according to the permit specifically, so that they can't operate in a way that's outside of natural gas, which is what this permit would be written for.
If you notice that they are operating outside of their permit, that is something that you can file with the regional office, and they will take complaints.
Okay, well, it's not like they're going to let me in to tell me what fuel they're using.
Right. So, but to get to the bottom line, as far as her question, they can't just change the fuel type spontaneously. That's something they have to come in and get a new authorization for.
That's correct. Yeah, they'd be not complying with state and federal rules in that case.
Okay, what is the percentage for the opacity for emissions from the stacks?
So I have that information right here. So during their routine operations, they're not. It's written into their permit this way that they cannot exceed 5% of opacity from each of the combustion turbine stacks, and that comes from the state rules, the 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 111, specifically, and that's determined as best available control technology, specifically for visible emissions and opacity from combined cycle gas turbines.
But we don't look at the worst case. We only look at the best.
When I mentioned best available control technology, it's essentially us saying that this is the best control technology used to reduce the emissions, so that they're using the best that's available out there. And at this time, it's to reduce, to have opacity not exceed 5%.
Okay.
During 6 main period.
Is formaldehyde going to be looked at? Is it going to be considered a greenhouse gas, or is that going to be a separate emission calculated?
It's included in the application, and so we've evaluated it in this project. It's not considered a greenhouse gas pollutant, but we did evaluate it in this project, including in the modeling as well. And so there's a specific standard for formaldehyde that we looked at as well. We looked at all of the pollutants that could be emitted from this power plant specifically.
Are they having to list and show greenhouse gases?
Yes, they're required, because there's a greenhouse gas permit. They're required to quantify all of their emissions of greenhouse gas at this proposed site.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get us to a break so we can come back and do the formal comment session. You are certainly welcome to meet with these folks during the break and continue asking your questions. It's 8:05. Let's be back in 5 minutes. That's 8:10. And we'll start the formal comment session. Thank you.
Okay.
To get us started tonight, our first group, we'll start with Tanya Leslie, who'll be followed by Jerry Mathis, Hugh Brown, and then Cheryl Dietrich Neff.
I'm going to pass. I have my answer.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll start with Tanya Leslie.
I'm Tanya Leslie. I live within less than a mile of the proposed site. I'm here to express my sorry. I deal with people who are asleep all day in surgery, and I'm not used to being around all these awake people. I'm here in opposition to the construction. This is less than a mile from my house. I'm concerned about the implications to our community, what we stand to lose, our quality of life. Rural Texans deserve to have a voice and truly feel threatened by this construction. The neighbors here in blue, we know we need electricity. However, we believe there's a better location deeper into the property. My husband and I have been members of this community for over a decade. We fell in love with the serene views, rolling hills, and ample timbers. We knew this was a place for us to retire and create memories. Our mornings on the porch, drinking coffee, watching the wildlife come alive are soon to be distant memories, as our new view will be stacks emitting steam and pollutants. The policy of this state is to protect us as residents, and I believe the proposed permit allocated by TCEQ will violate Texas Health and Safety Code Section 382.002. The state has a responsibility to safeguard the air resources from pollution by controlling or abating air pollution and emissions of air contaminants. This will be a violation of mine and my family's health, general welfare, and physical property, including the aesthetic enjoyment of air resources and maintenance of adequate visibility. The pollutants emanated by the proposed gas plant will negatively affect my family's health and viability. Any estimates of pollutions are just that, they're estimates. This new technology has not been proven to be cleaner, and I believe Sandow Lakes Energy is gambling with our lives. I notice everyone in favor has nothing to lose by supporting this project and believes it's reasonable to play Russian roulette with our community's health, livelihood, and property values. The residents of Blue, Texas deserve better than what Lee County officials have sold us out for.
Thank you. Up next is Jerry Mathis.
My name is Jerry Mathis. I've lived in Blue since 1995. I used to drive an hour each way to Southeast Austin to my job in semiconductor manufacturing. I would work a 12-hour shift and then make the hour drive home. It's 30 to 45 minutes to get fuel or groceries no matter which way you drive from Blue. I won't go into the disaster that is rural healthcare in Texas. Let's just suffice it to say, if you live in Blue and you need medical care, you're driving anywhere from an hour to 5 hours, depending on what kind of care you need. No one moves to Blue to be close to anything except nature. A 1,200 megawatt power plant like the one proposed by Sandow Lakes Energy has no place being plopped down in a residential area like this. All they need to do is move it back on their 33,000 acres. That's it. This power plant belongs in an industrial area, not in our backyards. What we need to keep in mind here is what makes Texas, Texas. I can tell you what it is. It's places like Blue. It's places like Adena. It's places like Serban. It's places like Lincoln. It's places like Dimebox. These places make us who we are. They make us Texas. To ruin these places in the name of progress so that Sandow Lakes from Dallas can make just a whole bunch of money is just plain wrong. Folks say we need the energy for the Texas electrical grid so we can keep the power on during peak times. How much energy from this plant will actually go to the grid?
1 minute.
80 megawatts out of 1,200? Where does the other 1,120 megawatts go? To contaminated land at Sandow Lakes Ranch, to the Bitcoin mining in Milam County, to the huge solar manufacturing plant? I personally don't think any of this power will be helping me at my house. There's many power plants that are being built all over Texas that are not being plopped down in residential areas, and the power plant from those is actually going to the grid. I respectfully ask that issuance of these permits be denied.
All right, thank you. You, Brown.
I'm Hugh Brown, and I live within 2 miles of the proposed plant. Now you government folks, you're going to issue or not issue this permit. And very likely, the existence of this plant will depend on whether or not you issue this permit. Now, we all know that the closer you live to the plant, the worse its pollution effects are. And there are all sorts of people living within 2 miles of this plant. Now, these folks over here, as the previous person said, has 33,000 acres that, as I understand right now, nobody lives on. They could put it, say, for instance, where the old Alcoa smelter was, and there wouldn't be anybody living near it that would not be affected. You want to stand up for health of people, then put it where people don't live. Do that. And so say, yeah, we'll give you your permit if you put it back on your land where then you can deal with your pollution. Instead of putting it at the far end where there's on 3 sides, there's all sorts of people living nearby. So it's really going to be up to you on how much you want to let these people strew grief in their wake and harm people so they can make their money instead of letting them deal with the consequences of their plant. So it's going to be largely your decision. Now,
1 minute.
I would like to say that presently, one of the things we talk about health, is quiet. It is quiet now. It is so quiet that often I have heard railroad trains going by, and the nearest track is down by McDade. That's a long ways off. It's really quiet. And you're proposing having obnoxious background noise 24/7. You know what that does to people? You know what it does to wildlife? It's a health stressor. It shouldn't be happening. Go put it again in the middle of your land, say where the old smelter was, up there by Alcoa Lake, and you can deal with it. But don't dump your trash on our heads. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so our next group, we'll start with Ed Harvey, followed by Susan Davis, Lynn Kane, and Rachel Kane Bailey. So Ed Harvey.
I'm Ed Harvey, and I'm from Blue. As these turbines and their cooling radiators are fairly new, do we know if high ambient temperatures will affect them? Aircraft turbines were limited as the oil viscosity was degraded at high temperatures. If temperatures do affect them at a most needy time for air conditioning, etc., they might have to have alternative cooling, which might adversely affect pollution, such as water cooling, etc. Has this been addressed? I believe the 90% scrubbing leaves 10% left over on pollution, which is too much. And I also believe this is too close to our neighbors. And I'm asking you to deny these applications. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Susan Davis.
My name is Susan Davis. I live near the proposed plant. I'll be looking at it every day out my kitchen window. It'll be wonderful. The proposed power plant sits southeast of our home and visible from our kitchen window. We are located within the EPA circle of affected parties for exposure to toxic discharge. The wind blows predominantly from the southeast up through the valley behind us, blowing directly into our home, into our backyard where we spend all of our time. Already mentioned the NIH earlier, has determined that discharge from natural gas plants at our range increase risk of hospitalizations for asthma, lung, and heart disease. My husband already has severe cardiac disease, and this will only aggravate it. High levels or above normal levels of carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, and methane, and acid rain conditions, all toxic and harmful to humans, plants, and animals, will be blowing directly into our home. For what purpose? When you have 30,000 acres of empty land, why would you put it right next to our homes? That is not very neighborly. It's a bad way to start off as a neighbor. Why not, and let's not even start with the light pollution. It's completely dark in that valley. I invite you to come to my home and see across the valley. It's completely black and dark. We have migrating birds the lights are going to affect. The other thing I'd like to mention is the noise. Someone mentioned it. Alcoa had a dredge line that ran along that road that was so loud. It reverberated up out of that valley. You could hear it for miles. I can only imagine how loud this plant is going to be in our neighborhood. From my backyard on the ridge, I can see all the way from the radio towers in Jackson to the Knobs and beyond. I call it Blue Valley. And the Texas Clean Air Act, which the TCEQ is supposed to enforce, is supposed to protect public health, general welfare, and physical property, and mine will all be affected by this power plant.
1 minute.
It's going to definitely affect our property valuations. We have invested our entire life into that property. We have grandchildren living on the property with us now, little grandchildren that are going to be exposed to this noxious gas now daily blowing up out of that valley. And I just do not understand. Please be a good neighbor. Please move the power plant into the center of your property where it won't affect so many residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Kane.
I don't know how she was able to be so far back and talk. So the mission, according to your website of TCEQ, is to protect public health, specifically clean air, clean water, and the safe management of waste, which whatever. But we have no baseline data on air quality for Lee County. We get the pollution that blows to Austin from Houston, and also then there's the smoke that comes in. There are days that, Lee County does not meet the air quality standards. So my question is, how do you determine that the additional pollution is going to create a hazardous situation? And I'm especially concerned about the 2.5 microns particles that, according to your website, can affect both the lungs and the heart. Particle pollution exposure is linked to premature death through lung, heart disease, aggravated asthma, decreased lung function, and there's even more things, but especially in the sensitive population. Well, Blue is a community of sensitive population. It's a community of young, old, farm animals, wildlife, and a very unique post-oak ecosystem that's not found anywhere else. So all of our health has been entrusted to your commission. Don't trade our clean air, which, as you've seen people explain, for energy that may or may not go to the Texas grid. They've never said it will. They've never said it won't. There were companies that participated in the Texas Energy Fund where they had to guarantee that a certain percentage would go to support the grid. Sandow Lakes decided not to participate in that. They've chosen to put this plant where it will do the most harm to those
1 minute.
those around us, which proves they're being bad neighbors. How can you trust the data that they provide when they've already proved that they're not trying to be the best neighbors they can? Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Kane Bailey.
Hello again. I just wanted to make sure to add to the record that my personal history, I've been on Advair off and on for quite a while. I lived in Pasadena, but wasn't in the corridor where they have all the manufacturing. It was actually on the other end of it. But just living there for about a year and a half, I had pneumonia multiple times, bronchitis countless times. Finally, I went to a pulmonologist who figured out that the chemicals were causing airway constriction, inflammation. I had to go on inhalers the whole time I lived there. I moved out as soon as I could. Since then, have been able to come off of that, but I am worried about what this will do. And not only we're building a new home so that we can be there more of the time, I'm out there at least 4 days a week for long periods of time out, and it's within half a mile. Also, my daughter, to give you an idea, she also has a sensory processing disorder, which makes her very sensitive to smells to the point where she's never eaten a pizza, never had a bite of a hamburger. When she was an infant, they handed her a bowl of rice and she threw up just touching it. So she's very sensitive to smells, and it does affect how well she does in her academics at school, behavior at home, sleep patterns, all these kinds of things, in addition to the actual detoxing. And she has SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, that have to do with her vitamin Ds, vitamin Bs, and minerals. So she's unable to detox as well. So we struggle with that as well with her medical care. So I just wanted all those to be brought up and put out there. And then also, I want to put that since then, I have been careful to use chemical free or very low chemical with cleaning. I don't wear perfumes, products I use on my body, in my home, pest services, anything like that. We're very, very, very cautious about the amount of chemicals because of our history. So I'm a little worried that we'll be so close. All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so our next group, we'll start with Roy Morris, who'll be followed by Eric Allman, Jewel Clark, and Camille Cook. Roy Morris. Eric Allman.
Good evening. I'm Eric Allman here on behalf of Move the Gas Plant, who is opposed to this facility. We submitted written comments earlier today, including a report by Dr. Ron Sehu, which explains a number of the deficiencies in the modeling which was performed here. Now, those errors include the use of AP42 factors in a way that is mechanistic and does not account for problems in those factors. And the reliance upon the manufacturer's guarantee is not proper, as it has not been documented. It is only intended for those to apply for a certain period of time, and they are not only to apply under certain conditions, which are not the conditions which will exist here. Beyond the modeling, there's also the problem of the improper exemption during startup at this facility. Startup is defined as lasting until the facility achieves compliance. That is no genuine limit upon the emissions that will be happening during startup. That's particularly a problem here because during startup is when the SCR facilities are not actually working yet. And it's when ammonia will be leaking through those the most. And by not controlling this facility during startup and having no requirement that would require the use of best available control technology during startup, it is significantly increasing the amount of ammonia that will be emitted from this facility. In addition, the facility will potentially contribute to non-attainment in the city of Austin area for ozone 8-hour standard. That is a hazard that should be avoided. And there have not been proper limits upon particulate matter included within this that are linked to the BTU use at the facility. In addition, it's not protective of public health, both because of the ammonia that will be contained within the emissions and the formaldehyde, which will be contained in the emissions, which have not been adequately accounted for. And for those reasons, we simply think the applicant has not met its burden of proof, and this permit should not be granted. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jewel Clark. Jewel Clark. Camille Cook.
Hi, good evening, y'all. My name is Camille Cook. I work at Public Citizen, and I've been doing a lot of research for the last year on power plants and the Texas Energy Fund, and seeing different folks that are around the state challenging these plants and these permits. And so through that research, these gas plants all over the state have been facing a lot of issues, a lot of criticisms, like if it's permits for expanded plants, we've seen overworked valves, noise pollution, all these things. We've seen revenue issues from the Texas Energy Fund. We've seen community pushback, big community pushback all across the state. And we've also seen significant supply chain issues. So I've seen that. I think this is the first like gas plant that y'all have been building. And so the supply chain issues seem very significant. I don't know if y'all have seen those, but there are also a lot of issues with this plant explicitly. Massive emissions. I mean, hundreds of tons per year of nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, particulate matter, almost 4 million tons of CO2. I think this is a clear violation of the Clean Air Act in Texas. Only 80 megawatts would go to the public. So even if there's another Winter Storm Uri situation, or if a storm blows down poles and wires, it's not guaranteeing any power to the people around here who are dealing with the negative consequences of living next to a massive power plant. There's been huge community pushback. There are thousands of hours of runtime, over 8,000 hours of runtime a year, and like was mentioned earlier, y'all will be regulating yourselves, looking at the emissions yourselves. Not to mention, this is going to be air cooled. It's going to be very loud, potentially like within nuisance levels of being loud. And I just also want to mention that even though I'm not a part of this community, I'm from Austin. Like Mr. Almonstead, we're also worried about violation of ozone standards in metropolitan Austin because we're teetering on the edge of our national ambient air quality standards. And so we think that is also a concern with this. And
1 minute.
I just want to finish by saying we stand in opposition to this permit with everyone else. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so our next group, we'll start with Travis Brown, and then Michelle Gangness, and then Trish Seiler.
Thanks. My name is Travis Brown, and I live in the Blue community for over 30 years. I'm opposed to this permit. I'm a member of the Move the Gas Plant Steering Committee. I don't think any of us in the community are surprised that the executive director of the TCEQ has come out and said that apparently in a preliminary decision that this application will not violate any state or federal laws. As our attorney, Eric Allman, has pointed out, we think that's a false determination. And as far as Sandow, Lexington Energy and TCEQ goes, as they say on TV, we'll see you in court because there will be a contested case hearing on this. And we intend to prove, based on our experts' analysis, that in fact this application will not meet state and federal law. I want to mention a couple of things. I'm kind of surprised that we heard nothing from the company here tonight. We thought we would hear some kind of justification for why they want to put this plant in our community as opposed to back on Sandow Lakes Ranch. I'm kind of surprised we haven't heard anybody who is in favor of this plant because there have been a handful of comments online from people who are in favor of this plant. I will point out that several of those comments, in fact, almost all of them are form letters apparently that were drafted by the company. And several of those people who put those comments actually work for Sandow Lakes Ranch, but did not divulge that in their comments. But I think the main thing I want to say is that some of the people who support this plant have said they need it because we need electricity in Texas and that Lee counties need this to prevent us going through bad winters without any power. But the fact is, as Sandow Lakes Energy says in its application and the TCEQ analysis says, of that 1,200 megawatts, only 80 megawatts of that power is ever going to be available to the public. And if even that, because eventually, and probably from the beginning, almost all that power is going to go to the facilities at Sandow Lakes Ranch.
One minute.
Right now, that means the huge Bitcoin mining operations there, which, as we all know, is a scam because they make more money by selling power back to the grid than by mining. And I have suspicions that part of the whole motivation for this by Sandow Lakes Energy, by Sandow Lakes Ranch, and by ZBEC, the Dallas real estate company that's behind all this, is they want to join in on that scam as they make as much money as they can by configuring this power thing where they can sell some of that power back to the grid and make a lot of money. One last thing real quick. The other argument in favor of this plant is that it would provide needed property tax dollars for Lee County. Our own county judge, our county commissioner, and other county officials have said in public that they are skeptical our county will ever see any significant tax revenues from this for a number of reasons. The state may exempt these plants from property taxes, plus you can bet when tax time comes, Sandow Lakes Energy is going to be arguing before the county to lower their tax valuation there and probably seek a tax abatement there. So
That's your time. Go ahead and wrap up, please.
There's no benefit to Lee County and particularly to the Blue community for this plant. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Michelle Gagnes.
Thank you. Good job on my name. No one ever gets it right. My name is Michelle Gagnes. I'm a resident of Blue for the past, since 1998. I'm a member also of the steering committee for Move the Gas Plant. So I submitted extensive comments, as did about at least 65 other folks who are, as of counting now, about 65 other folks who are opposed to the plant. As Travis noted, very few who are in favor of it, and of those, they don't live even in Lee County in some cases. So all I want to do is just recap a little bit, just make a couple of notes. One is, I understand private property rights and the rights to maximize profits from your property, but that is not mutually exclusive with being a good neighbor or even a decent neighbor. We had no warning of this plant. You could have bought property the day before it was announced in February and you wouldn't have had a clue that this might happen. That's not a good neighbor. We're not off on a good footing. So I would hope that the company would think long and hard that they do have an alternate location within 33,000 acres. There's other places to go. This would not be happening in an urban community. There are other places within urban communities that are dedicated to industrial facilities. You don't just plop one down in a neighborhood. Blue is the fastest growing residential area in Lee County. This should not happen to us for all the reasons that people have said and all the reasons you will read in the comments that you've received. Everyone has had their life upended by the fact that this could ruin Blue and just be the precursor to whatever happens later. Thank you.
Thank you. Trish Seiler.
Here we are again. Okay, so I am opposed to this permit being approved for this area. My family and I reside at 1501 County Road 312. It's less than a mile from the proposed gas site. You know, I bought 10 acres out in the middle of nowhere to get away from the city, pollution, all of that stuff, the lights. I enjoy going outside at night and seeing all the stars, which you can't do in town. My grandchildren live on my property with me. They are 2, 5, and 7. My son-in-law and daughter live there as well. My son-in-law has asthma. I am a Gulf War veteran, and I lived through the burn pits and the rain from the oil well fires, and those fires were not anywhere close to me, and I still got rained black. So, same as acid rain, the stuff moves. It is so quiet out where we live that I can hear my neighbors a quarter of a mile down the road doing target practice, and you can hear the ping on his targets. You can hear the frogs and the coyotes at night. It's very peaceful. We're not going to have that if you build a power plant there. We have a lot of wildlife out there. You all know about the mountain lions? We've got mountain lions, coyotes, bobcats, wild hogs. Not everything is great, but it's all country. I have enough anxiety in my life, and the thought of them putting this power plant next to my house and the health implications that are going to come from it it's horrible for me. Sandow Lake said, and I quote, "Community is placed at the center of our vision with a clear outline for exceptional education, health, and wellness. It's an opportunity to reconnect with self-sufficient living too. The lifestyle will be at one with nature as we steward this precious land together for generations to come." Apparently not my land, but their land, because they're not being a good neighbor. If they were a good neighbor, they would not put this in the backyard of residences. And there's more substations to come. It's on their website. They're doing 1.2 gigawatts now. By 2028, they are saying that they want to have 3.9 gigawatts. So this isn't the end. It's not a one and done. They are going to put more power plants out here at the very end of the property that they own. I ask that you deny this application and have them move it to where there are not homes. And I will send the rest of my information in writing because I don't have time to talk about Duke Energy, who just got through with their 4-year R&D program. I didn't see you guys using any of their emissions.
Trish, that is your time. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can steer you down too.
All right, folks. So Trish was the last person who signed up to provide comments. Is there anyone who's not yet had the opportunity to provide comments during tonight's meeting that would like to do so? Anyone who's not yet? Okay, come on up. Did you fill out one of our registration forms? I did. All right. Go ahead and state your name, please, and then provide your comments. And if there's anyone else who thinks they might like to comment, make your way towards the microphone as well. Go ahead.
I'll be really short and sweet.
Get real close to the microphone, please.
I'll be really short and sweet. I am both elderly and a member of the vulnerable population because I have a respiratory chronic disease that will ultimately kill me if something else doesn't first. I don't live in immediate vicinity of the plant, but I live pretty darn close. I'm extremely sensitive to air pollution. I do not expect that the world to cater to me or put me in a bubble, but I do expect my state to protect my air quality, and I do not believe that they will do that if this plant comes in. So yeah, I'm scared. Thank you.
Your name, ma'am?
Jane Levan.
All right, thank you. Anyone else who's not yet had the opportunity to provide comments that would like to do so? All right, so in closing, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process moving forward. After tonight, TCEQ staff will go back to the agency, review all the comments that have been submitted in writing, review the comments that were provided here tonight, start working on that response to comments document. Once they complete that, and it may take several months, but once they complete that, they'll mail it out to everyone who's on the mailing list for this application, which includes those folks who provided comments either in writing or here at the microphone tonight. That response to comments document will have a letter attached to it explaining the decision of the executive director and how to participate further in the process if you wish to do so. So that'll be the next thing that you should see from us in the mail is the response to comments. Once again, I'd like to thank Senator Kolkhorst and Representative Gerdes for requesting tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank all of y'all for coming out tonight, for your cooperation, your patience. Thank you for your questions and thank you for your comments. We'll be here another 10 or 15 minutes as we pack up our equipment and clean up after ourselves. If you'd like to come up and chat, feel free to do so. Otherwise, have a great evening. I hope you have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. Thank you, everybody.